Introduction. Why most people are controlled by their emotions. Most people believe they are thinking logically, making rational decisions, and living with control over their minds. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. Most people live emotionally reactive lives without even realizing it. Their emotions quietly control their decisions, relationships, habits, confidence, and future. Fear shapes what they avoid. Anger controls how they react. Anxiety influences what they postpone. Overthinking drains their energy and keeps them trapped inside mental loops that never end. Instead of controlling emotions, they become controlled by them. Modern life makes this even worse. Endless notifications, social media comparison, constant stimulation, stress, pressure, and information overload keep the mind in a permanent state of emotional exhaustion. People are overwhelmed mentally, but rarely understand why. They react impulsively, lose emotional control easily, and make decisions based on temporary feelings instead of long-term thinking. The hidden cost of emotional impulsiveness is enormous. Broken relationships, regret, missed opportunities, anxiety, self-doubt, and wasted potential often begin with the inability to control emotional reactions. But emotionally strong people think differently. They understand that true power comes from calmness, self-awareness, discipline, and emotional control. This book will teach you how to stop reacting impulsively, master your emotions, build mental toughness, stay calm under pressure, and develop the kind of emotional strength that creates real freedom in life. Chapter 1. Your brain is wired to react. Your brain was not designed to make you peaceful, confident, or emotionally balanced. It was designed to keep you alive. Every emotional reaction you experience today is deeply connected to ancient survival mechanisms that helped human beings survive dangerous environments thousands of years ago. Fear, anxiety, stress, anger, and emotional impulsiveness are not random flaws in your personality. They are biological survival responses created by evolution. The problem is that the modern world has changed dramatically, while the human brain still operates using ancient survival wiring. For most of human history, survival depended on reacting quickly to danger. Early humans lived in environments filled with predators, starvation, violence, and constant uncertainty. Hesitation could mean death. Overthinking danger calmly was not useful when a predator could attack at any moment. The brain evolved to prioritize survival over happiness because survival was the first requirement for everything else. As a result, the human nervous system became highly sensitive to threat detection. At the center of the survival system is a small part of the brain called the amygdala. The amygdala acts like an internal alarm system, constantly scanning the environment for possible danger. Its job is simple: protect you from threats as quickly as possible. The amygdala reacts before rational thinking fully activates because speed mattered more than accuracy during human evolution. If ancient humans mistakenly reacted to danger that was not real, they simply wasted energy. But if they ignored real danger, they could die. Because of this, the brain evolved to prioritize caution, fear, and emotional reactivity. The amygdala does not think logically. It reacts emotionally and automatically. When it senses danger, it immediately triggers survival responses throughout the body. Heart rate increases, muscles tighten, breathing changes, stress hormones flood the nervous system. Rational thinking weakens while emotional survival mode becomes stronger. This entire process happens extremely fast because the brain is designed to protect you before conscious thought fully develops. This creates the fight, flight, or freeze response. Fight means preparing to confront danger aggressively. Flight means escaping or avoiding the threat entirely. Freeze means shutting down mentally or physically when overwhelmed. These responses once helped humans survive physical danger. But today, The brain often reacts to psychological stress the same way it once reacted to life-threatening situations. This is why modern emotional reactions feel so intense. Public speaking can trigger panic because the brain interprets social judgment as danger. A difficult conversation can create anxiety because conflict activates survival instincts. Rejection feels painful because the brain processes social exclusion as a threat to survival. Even emails, deadlines, financial stress, or criticism can activate the nervous system as if physical danger exists. The brain struggles to distinguish between actual physical threats and emotional discomfort. To the nervous system, embarrassment, uncertainty, rejection, failure, and criticism can feel dangerously real. This is why emotional reactions happen automatically even when situations are not truly life-threatening. Your brain is trying to protect you using survival systems built for a completely different world. Modern life creates constant low-level stress that keeps the nervous system overstimulated. Endless notifications, social media comparison, work pressure, financial anxiety, information overload, and constant stimulation repeatedly activate emotional survival systems. The brain never fully relaxes because it constantly scans for emotional threats. As a result, many people live in permanent stress mode without realizing it. This overstimulation weakens emotional control because chronic stress keeps the nervous system reactive. Small problems begin feeling overwhelming. Minor criticism feels deeply personal. Anxiety increases because the brain remains hyperalert continuously. Emotional impulsiveness becomes more common because the survival system overrides rational thinking repeatedly. Emotional reactions are therefore not signs of weakness. They are automatic survival patterns. Fear, anger, avoidance, and anxiety were designed to protect human beings from danger. The problem is that these survival mechanisms often overreact in modern environments where psychological stress has replaced physical threats. Your brain still uses ancient wiring in a modern world filled with emotional pressure instead of predators. This explains why reacting emotionally feels so natural. The brain is designed to react first and think later. Calmness requires conscious effort because emotional survival systems activate automatically. This is why emotional mastery feels difficult initially. You are not fighting against simple habits alone. You are working against deeply ingrained biological programming shaped over thousands of years. Most people never fully understand this process. They assume emotional reactions define who they are permanently. They think anxiety means weakness, fear means inability, or emotional impulsiveness means lack of intelligence. But understanding the brain changes everything. Once you realize that emotional reactions are automatic survival responses rather than permanent identity traits, you stop seeing yourself as broken. The goal is not to eliminate emotions completely. That is impossible. Emotions are valuable signals created by the brain to protect and guide human behavior. Fear can create caution. Anger can signal violated boundaries. Anxiety can encourage preparation. But problems begin when emotional reactions control behavior automatically without awareness or regulation. Emotionally strong people are not individuals without fear or stress. They are individuals who learned how to regulate their nervous systems instead of blindly obeying emotional impulses. They understand the difference between feeling emotion and becoming controlled by emotion. That difference changes everything. The brain remains adaptable throughout life. Neural pathways strengthen based on repeated behaviors, thoughts, and emotional patterns. This means emotional reactions can be retrained over time. Calmness can become stronger. Emotional regulation can improve. Fear responses can weaken through repeated exposure and self-control. The nervous system can learn safety instead of constant reactivity. But this transformation requires awareness first. You must recognize when the brain is entering survival mode automatically. You must understand that emotions often reflect ancient protective systems rather than objective truth. Fear may feel real without actually representing danger. Anxiety may appear even when you are fully capable. Emotional discomfort may simply mean growth is happening. Modern society often encourages emotional impulsiveness rather than emotional mastery. People are rewarded for instant reactions, emotional expression, outrage, and constant stimulation. Very few people train themselves to pause, regulate emotions, and think strategically before responding. This is why emotional control has become increasingly rare and increasingly valuable. The people who master emotional regulation gain enormous advantages in every area of life. They think more clearly under pressure. They remain calmer during uncertainty. They make better long-term decisions. They recover faster from setbacks. They build stronger relationships because they do not react impulsively to every emotional trigger. Understanding your brain is the beginning of emotional freedom. Once you realize your emotional reactions are deeply connected to ancient survival wiring, you stop feeling powerless against them. You begin understanding that reacting emotionally may feel natural, but staying controlled is trainable. And that realization becomes the first step toward mastering your mind instead of being controlled by it. Chapter 2: Emotional Reactions Are Secretly Ruining Your Life. Most people do not realize how much damage their emotional reactions create every single day. They assume emotional impulsiveness is normal because everyone around them behaves the same way. People lose control when angry, shut down when anxious, overreact when stressed, and make decisions based on temporary emotions without ever questioning the long-term consequences. But emotional reactions quietly destroy relationships, opportunities, confidence, and peace of mind in ways most people never fully recognize. One emotional outburst can damage trust built over years. One impulsive decision made during anger can create consequences that last a lifetime. One emotionally reactive moment can destroy opportunities, relationships, careers, and self-respect. Yet most people continue living emotionally reactive lives because reacting feels natural and immediate, while self-control requires awareness and discipline. The problem with emotional reactions is that they happen faster than rational thinking. When emotions become intense, the logical part of the brain weakens while survival systems take control. This means people often say things they do not mean, make decisions they later regret, and behave in ways that contradict their long-term goals. In emotional moments, short-term feelings overpower long-term thinking. This is why anger creates destructive behavior so easily. Anger narrows perception and makes people focus only on immediate emotional satisfaction. The goal becomes winning the argument, proving a point, or releasing emotional pressure rather than solving problems intelligently. People say hurtful words, become aggressive, and damage relationships simply because emotional impulses temporarily feel more important than long-term consequences. But anger is not the only emotion that creates destruction. Anxiety silently ruins lives in different ways. While anger pushes people toward impulsive action, anxiety pushes people toward avoidance. Opportunities are missed because fear creates hesitation. Conversations are avoided because rejection feels dangerous. Goals are abandoned because uncertainty creates emotional discomfort. People stay trapped inside comfort zones for years without realizing fear is controlling their decisions. Emotional decision-making almost always prioritizes temporary emotional relief over long-term growth. This is why emotionally reactive people often sabotage their own future without realizing it. They quit too early because challenges feel uncomfortable. They avoid difficult conversations because anxiety feels overwhelming. They make impulsive purchases because emotional spending creates temporary relief. They seek distraction instead of discipline because discomfort feels threatening. Reacting and responding are completely different psychological processes. Reacting is automatic, emotional, and impulsive. Responding is conscious, thoughtful, and controlled. Most people react because emotions immediately take over behavior before awareness fully activates. Emotionally strong people learn how to pause before responding. That pause changes everything. When someone criticizes you, reacting means becoming defensive immediately. Responding means listening calmly and deciding whether the criticism contains truth or not. When stress appears, reacting means panicking emotionally. Responding means assessing the situation strategically. When conflict happens, reacting means escalating emotionally. Responding means controlling emotions while focusing on solutions. This difference determines the quality of nearly every area of life. Emotionally reactive people often believe their feelings justify their behavior. They say things like, "I was angry," "I was stressed," or "I couldn't control myself." But emotions explain behavior. They do not excuse destructive actions. The inability to regulate emotions weakens judgment and leads to repeated mistakes that slowly damage every part of life. Strong emotions narrow thinking dramatically. Fear makes people focus only on danger. Anger focuses attention only on threats and disrespect. Anxiety focuses attention only on uncertainty and negative outcomes. This emotional narrowing reduces the ability to think objectively or strategically. People become trapped inside emotional perception rather than reality. This is why emotional chaos creates poor decisions repeatedly. During emotional states, people often ignore logic, future consequences, and rational thinking entirely. They react to temporary feelings as if those feelings represent permanent truth. But emotions constantly change while consequences often remain. The hidden cost of emotional chaos is enormous. Relationships become unstable because emotional reactions destroy trust and communication. Careers suffer because emotional impulsiveness damages professionalism and consistency. Mental health declines because constant emotional instability creates chronic stress and exhaustion. Confidence weakens because emotionally reactive people lose respect for themselves after repeated regretful behavior. Regret is one of the clearest consequences of emotional impulsiveness. Almost everyone has experienced moments they wish they could reverse. Angry words spoken impulsively, opportunities avoided because of fear, decisions made under stress, relationships damaged because emotions became stronger than self-control. These moments create emotional pain because deep down, people know they were capable of responding differently. The painful truth is that many life problems are not caused by external circumstances alone. They are caused by uncontrolled emotional reactions to those circumstances. Two people can face the same challenge while creating completely different outcomes depending on emotional control. One reacts emotionally and creates more problems. The other stays calm and finds solutions. Emotional reactions also create self-sabotage patterns that quietly destroy potential over time. Many people blame lack of success on intelligence, luck, or opportunity when the real issue is emotional impulsiveness. Fear prevents action. Anxiety creates procrastination. Overthinking delays decisions. Emotional discomfort weakens discipline. Stress destroys consistency. Self-sabotage often looks harmless at first because emotional avoidance provides temporary relief. Avoiding difficult tasks feels comfortable temporarily. Delaying action reduces anxiety briefly. Escaping discomfort creates short-term emotional relief. But over time, these patterns compound into frustration, regret, and lost potential. The human brain naturally seeks emotional comfort, even when comfort creates long-term suffering. This is why emotionally reactive behavior becomes addictive. Reacting impulsively releases emotional tension immediately, which temporarily feels rewarding. But temporary relief often creates permanent problems. Emotionally disciplined people understand something most people never fully learn. Emotions are temporary, but consequences can last for years. Because of this, they train themselves to tolerate emotional discomfort without immediately reacting to it. They understand that feeling anger does not require aggressive behavior. Feeling fear does not require avoidance. Feeling anxiety does not require surrender. This level of emotional control creates enormous personal freedom. When emotions stop controlling behavior automatically, decision-making becomes clearer and more strategic. Relationships improve because communication becomes calmer and more intentional. Confidence grows because self-respect increases. Mental clarity strengthens because emotional chaos weakens. The goal is not emotional suppression. Suppressing emotions completely creates different psychological problems. Real emotional mastery means acknowledging emotions without allowing them to dominate behavior. It means feeling anger without becoming destructive, feeling fear without becoming paralyzed, feeling anxiety without losing control. Emotionally reactive people spend their lives controlled by temporary feelings. Emotionally disciplined people build lives guided by values, long-term thinking, and conscious decisions instead of emotional impulses. And that difference determines whether emotions become tools for growth or weapons for self-destruction. Chapter 3. Overthinking is emotional fear. Most people believe overthinking means they are intelligent, careful, or deeply analytical. They assume constantly thinking about problems makes them more prepared, more responsible, or more likely to succeed. But in reality, overthinking is rarely wisdom. Most of the time, overthinking is emotional fear disguised as thinking. The brain overthinks because uncertainty feels dangerous. Human beings naturally crave certainty because certainty creates emotional safety. When outcomes feel unpredictable, the brain becomes uncomfortable and starts searching obsessively for answers, control, and reassurance. This process creates endless mental analysis that often leads nowhere except exhaustion. From an evolutionary perspective, uncertainty once represented genuine danger. Early humans survived by predicting threats before they happened. The brain evolved to scan constantly for possible risks, dangers, and negative outcomes. This survival mechanism helped human beings stay alive in dangerous environments. But in modern life, the same survival wiring often turns ordinary uncertainty into emotional stress. The problem is that life itself is uncertain. Relationships are uncertain. Careers are uncertain. Success is uncertain. The future is uncertain. No amount of thinking can remove uncertainty completely. Yet the brain keeps trying anyway because emotional fear demands control. This is why overthinking feels addictive. The mind believes that if it keeps analyzing the situation long enough, it will eventually eliminate risk completely. People replay conversations repeatedly, imagine future problems endlessly, and mentally rehearse situations over and over because the brain thinks thinking itself creates safety. But this safety is mostly an illusion. Overthinking creates the illusion of control. When people analyze every possible outcome, they temporarily feel more prepared emotionally. The mind mistakes mental activity for progress. But thinking about action is not the same as taking action. In fact, excessive thinking often delays action entirely. This creates paralysis by analysis. The more people think, the more possibilities they discover. The more possibilities they discover, the more uncertainty appears. The more uncertainty appears, the more anxiety grows. Eventually, thinking becomes so overwhelming that action feels impossible. A person wants to start a business but spends years researching instead of beginning. Someone wants to approach a relationship but keeps imagining rejection and embarrassment until they avoid the opportunity entirely. Another person wants to change careers but overanalyzes every possible risk until fear keeps them trapped in the same situation indefinitely. Overthinking creates mental prisons where people become trapped inside their own thoughts instead of living in reality. One of the most destructive aspects of overthinking is imagined scenarios. The brain constantly creates fictional future situations filled with failure, rejection, embarrassment, disappointment, or disaster. Most of these imagined outcomes never happen, but emotionally, the brain reacts as if they are real. This means overthinkers often suffer emotionally from events that do not even exist. They experience stress, anxiety, fear, and emotional exhaustion because of imaginary situations created entirely by the mind. The nervous system cannot fully distinguish between vividly imagined danger and actual danger. As a result, the body reacts emotionally to thoughts as if those thoughts represent reality. Mental loops strengthen this problem further. The brain repeats the same thoughts repeatedly, searching for certainty, solutions, or emotional relief. But instead of creating clarity, repetitive thinking increases confusion and anxiety. The mind keeps returning to the same fears because it believes the answer is just one more thought away. This cycle becomes exhausting because the brain never reaches emotional closure. Every answer creates another question. Every possibility creates another uncertainty. The mind becomes trapped in endless analysis without peace. Overthinking also destroys confidence slowly and quietly. Confidence is built through action, experience, and proof. But overthinking delays action continuously. When people avoid taking action, they never gain the evidence needed to trust themselves. Fear grows stronger because uncertainty remains unresolved. The longer someone overthinks, the bigger situations appear emotionally. Small challenges become overwhelming because the brain magnifies them repeatedly through mental analysis. A simple conversation becomes terrifying after days of overthinking. A small decision feels life-changing after endless mental rehearsal. Overthinking weakens self-trust because it teaches the brain that uncertainty is dangerous. People begin doubting their ability to handle situations naturally. Instead of trusting themselves to adapt and respond, they believe they must mentally control every possible outcome beforehand. This creates chronic anxiety because complete control is impossible. The irony is that overthinking often creates the very outcomes people fear most. Anxiety during conversations creates awkwardness. Fear of failure weakens performance. Constant hesitation creates missed opportunities. Emotional exhaustion reduces focus and energy. By trying to avoid discomfort mentally, people accidentally create more discomfort in reality. Action is the only real antidote to overthinking because action interrupts fear. The brain learns through experience, not endless thinking. Once action begins, uncertainty starts shrinking because reality replaces imagination. Fear survives best inside avoidance and mental analysis. Action exposes fear to reality. This is why courageous people are not fearless people. Courageous people simply act before their emotions fully agree. They understand that waiting to feel ready often means waiting forever. Confidence appears after action, not before it. Every time someone takes action despite uncertainty, the nervous system learns an important lesson. Uncertainty is survivable. Fear weakens because the brain gathers evidence that discomfort does not equal danger. Over time, action retrains the mind to tolerate uncertainty instead of fearing it constantly. Breaking overthinking patterns requires awareness first. People must recognize when thinking stops being useful and starts becoming emotional avoidance. Productive thinking solves problems and leads to decisions. Overthinking repeats fear without creating progress. One powerful way to interrupt mental loops is focusing on what can actually be controlled. Most overthinking centers around uncontrollable outcomes, opinions, future events, or imagined possibilities. But emotional peace increases when attention shifts toward controllable actions instead of uncontrollable outcomes. Breathing techniques, movement, journaling, and mindfulness can also reduce mental overload because they bring awareness back to the present moment instead of imaginary futures. The mind calms when attention returns to reality rather than endless hypothetical scenarios. Limiting information overload is equally important. Modern life floods the brain with constant stimulation, comparison, opinions, and uncertainty. Social media, endless news, and non-stop digital input overstimulate the nervous system and increase mental noise. Overthinking becomes worse when the brain never fully rests. Emotionally strong people understand that clarity often comes from movement, not endless analysis. They make decisions with incomplete certainty because they trust their ability to adapt along the way. They understand that life rewards action more than perfect thinking. The truth is that overthinking is rarely about solving problems. It is usually about trying to avoid emotional discomfort. But avoiding discomfort mentally only strengthens fear further. Real growth begins when people stop trying to think their way into certainty and start acting their way into confidence. Chapter 4. Silence is Power. Most people think power comes from speaking louder, reacting faster, defending themselves aggressively, or proving their point emotionally. They believe strength means always responding, always explaining, always fighting back. But true emotional power often appears in the exact opposite form. Real power is calmness. Real power is control. Real power is silence. Silence is powerful because it shows emotional discipline. When someone cannot control their emotions, they react automatically. They become defensive when criticized, angry when challenged, anxious when ignored, and impulsive when emotionally triggered. Their emotions control their behavior publicly for everyone to see. But emotionally strong people do something different. They pause. They observe. They remain calm. And that calmness creates enormous psychological strength. The inability to stay silent often reveals emotional weakness. People react quickly because they feel emotionally threatened. The ego wants immediate defense. The mind wants validation. Emotions demand expression. But reacting impulsively usually creates regret, conflict, and loss of control. Silence interrupts emotional impulsiveness. It creates space between emotion and action. Inside that space lies emotional intelligence. Most people never pause long enough to use it. Their emotions take over too quickly. They speak before thinking, react before understanding, and escalate situations emotionally instead of controlling them strategically. The psychology of non-reaction is deeply powerful because emotional reactions feed conflict. When someone insults you and you react emotionally, you give them emotional access to your mind. You allow another person to control your internal state. Your peace disappears because someone else triggered your emotion successfully. Emotionally reactive people are easy to manipulate because their behavior is predictable. Anger controls them. Fear controls them. Ego controls them. Once someone understands their emotional triggers, they can influence their behavior easily. But calm people become difficult to manipulate because they do not react automatically. Non-reaction creates emotional freedom. It means external situations no longer control your internal state completely. Someone can criticize you without destroying your peace. Someone can disrespect you without forcing emotional chaos into your mind. Someone can disagree with you without controlling your emotions. This does not mean becoming weak, passive, or emotionless. It means developing enough emotional control to choose responses consciously instead of reacting impulsively. One of the biggest reasons reacting gives away power is because emotional reactions reveal internal insecurity. The stronger the emotional reaction, the more emotionally affected someone becomes. Calmness communicates confidence because emotionally secure people do not need constant defense or validation. Think about emotionally strong individuals during conflict. They speak slowly. They remain composed. They do not panic emotionally. Their calmness creates psychological stability while emotional people lose control around them. In difficult situations, calm people naturally gain influence because emotional stability creates trust and authority. Strategic patience is another form of emotional power most people never develop. Modern society encourages immediate reactions, instant replies, instant anger, instant opinions, instant emotional expression. But emotionally intelligent people understand that immediate emotional reactions are often destructive. Patience allows emotions to settle before decisions are made. It allows clarity to return before words are spoken. It prevents temporary feelings from creating permanent consequences. Silence becomes protection against impulsive mistakes. Many arguments become destructive not because of the original issue, but because emotional reactions escalate the situation. One angry sentence triggers another. One defensive response creates more defensiveness. Two emotionally reactive people create emotional chaos together because neither person pauses long enough to regain control. Calmness during conflict changes everything. When one person remains emotionally grounded, emotional escalation weakens naturally. Calmness disrupts emotional cycles. It becomes difficult for conflict to continue at the same intensity when someone refuses to react impulsively. This is why silence often frustrates emotionally reactive people. They expect emotional participation. They expect arguments, defensiveness, or emotional retaliation. But calm silence removes emotional fuel from the interaction. It creates emotional imbalance because reactive people lose the control they expected to have. Emotionally strong people understand something extremely important. Not every situation deserves a reaction. Many conflicts are distractions. Many criticisms are projections. Many insults reveal more about the other person than about you. Reacting to everything emotionally drains mental energy constantly. Silence protects peace. Emotional detachment is not emotional coldness. It means refusing to let every external situation control your emotional state. Detached people still feel emotions deeply, but they are not controlled by them automatically. They observe emotions without becoming consumed by them. This creates enormous inner peace because emotional stability no longer depends entirely on external circumstances. Other people's moods stop controlling your happiness. Criticism stops destroying your confidence. Temporary problems stop creating complete emotional collapse. Emotionally detached people become mentally stronger because they stop personalizing everything. They understand that many people react from their own pain, insecurity, fear, or stress. Instead of absorbing every negative interaction emotionally, they maintain perspective. Silence also creates clarity. Emotional reactions cloud thinking. Anger narrows perception. Anxiety weakens judgment. Fear creates irrational thinking. But silence allows the nervous system to calm down so rational thought can return. This is why emotionally intelligent people often pause before speaking during difficult moments. They understand the danger of emotionally charged words. Once spoken, words cannot be taken back easily. Silence prevents emotional damage, while clarity rebuilds internally. Becoming emotionally untouchable does not mean life stops hurting you. It means your emotional stability becomes stronger than external chaos. Difficult situations still happen, criticism still appears, stress still exists, but your emotional reactions become controlled instead of automatic. Emotionally untouchable people understand that peace is a skill, not luck. They train themselves to remain grounded under pressure. They stop seeking validation from everyone around them. They stop needing to win every argument. They stop allowing temporary emotions to dominate permanent decisions. One of the most powerful forms of confidence is the ability to stay calm while others lose control. Calmness communicates strength more powerfully than aggression ever can. Loud emotional reactions often come from insecurity, fear, or lack of control. Silence often comes from confidence, awareness, and emotional discipline. This is why mature people value peace more than emotional victories. Winning arguments emotionally means very little if peace disappears afterward. Emotional reactions may feel satisfying temporarily, but they often create stress, regret, and damaged relationships later. Silence teaches emotional mastery because it forces awareness. Instead of instantly reacting, you learn to observe your emotions first. You notice anger without immediately expressing it. You feel anxiety without immediately surrendering to it. You experience emotional triggers without automatically obeying them. That pause changes identity slowly over time. The more someone practices emotional control, the less external chaos affects them internally. They become more peaceful, more thoughtful, and more mentally strong. They stop living emotionally reactive lives and begin living consciously instead. And eventually, silence stops feeling like weakness. It starts feeling like power. Chapter 5. Fear of Judgment Controls. Most people are not living freely. They are living carefully. Every decision, every action, every conversation is quietly influenced by one invisible force: the fear of judgment. People worry about what others think before they speak, before they act, before they post online, before they pursue goals, and even before they express their true personalities. Entire lives become controlled by external opinions without people fully realizing it. Human beings naturally crave validation because survival once depended on social belonging. Thousands of years ago, rejection from the tribe could mean isolation, danger, or death. The brain evolved to value acceptance deeply because social connection increased survival chances. As a result, modern humans still experience rejection and embarrassment as emotionally painful threats. The problem is that this ancient survival wiring now controls modern behavior in unhealthy ways. People become emotionally dependent on approval. They constantly seek reassurance that they are accepted, liked, admired, or validated by others. Their confidence rises when they receive approval and collapses when they face criticism or rejection. This creates a dangerous psychological trap because self-worth becomes controlled by external opinions rather than internal stability. When confidence depends on other people's reactions, emotional peace becomes fragile. One negative comment can destroy confidence. One rejection can create deep insecurity. One moment of embarrassment can feel emotionally devastating. Fear of judgment silently shapes most people's lives more than they realize. Many people never pursue their real goals because they fear looking foolish. Others avoid speaking honestly because they fear criticism. Some stay trapped in careers, relationships, or lifestyles that make them unhappy simply because they fear what others might think if they changed. This fear creates invisible prisons. People hide parts of themselves constantly. They hide opinions, dreams, insecurities, creativity, emotions, and ambitions because they want social acceptance. Instead of expressing who they truly are, they build socially acceptable versions of themselves designed to avoid rejection. Over time, This becomes emotionally exhausting because pretending requires constant mental energy. People begin losing connection with their authentic identity because they spend so much time performing for approval. They stop asking themselves what they genuinely want and start focusing entirely on what will make them accepted by others. Social media has intensified this problem dramatically. Modern platforms are built around validation systems. Likes, comments, views, followers, and online approval trigger dopamine responses inside the brain. People begin measuring self-worth through digital reactions. Validation becomes addictive because every notification creates temporary emotional reward. But this creates comparison culture, one of the most destructive psychological environments in modern life. People constantly compare their appearance, success, lifestyle, relationships, and achievements to carefully edited versions of other people's lives online. The brain naturally interprets comparison as social ranking, which increases insecurity and emotional pressure. The problem is that comparison destroys peace because there will always be someone richer, more attractive, more successful, or more accomplished. When self-worth depends on comparison, satisfaction becomes impossible. People keep chasing external validation endlessly while feeling emotionally empty internally. Fear of embarrassment also controls behavior powerfully. Most people fear looking foolish more than they fear failure itself. They avoid trying new things because temporary embarrassment feels emotionally unbearable. They stay silent during opportunities because they fear judgment. They avoid attention because visibility creates emotional vulnerability. But embarrassment is rarely as dangerous as the brain believes. Most people are too focused on themselves to analyze others as deeply as imagined. The mind exaggerates judgment because emotional survival systems still treat social rejection like serious danger. Emotionally dependent people become highly reactive to opinions because approval controls their emotional state. Compliments create emotional highs while criticism creates emotional collapse. Their identity becomes unstable because it constantly changes depending on how others respond to them. This dependence weakens confidence deeply. Real confidence cannot exist when emotional stability depends entirely on external validation. True confidence comes from self-trust, self-respect, and internal alignment rather than constant approval from others. Internally confident people still appreciate positive feedback, but they are not emotionally controlled by it. Criticism does not destroy them because their identity is not built entirely on external opinions. Rejection hurts temporarily, but it does not define their self-worth permanently. Building internal confidence requires learning how to validate yourself instead of relying constantly on others. This means developing personal standards, values, and self-awareness that exist independently from public approval. It means respecting yourself enough to act according to your principles, even when others disagree. One of the most powerful shifts happens when people realize that opinions are subjective, temporary, and often meaningless. Every person views the world through their own experiences, insecurities, beliefs, and emotional state. Criticism often reveals more about the other person than about you. People project constantly. Insecure people criticize confidence. Fearful people criticize risk-taking. Negative people criticize ambition. Emotionally reactive people criticize calmness. If someone is emotionally limited, they often attack qualities they do not understand or possess themselves. Understanding this creates emotional detachment from opinions. Detached people stop treating every judgment as truth. They listen thoughtfully when criticism is useful, but they no longer absorb every opinion emotionally. This creates enormous freedom because life stops revolving around pleasing everyone. Trying to gain universal approval is impossible. No matter what someone does, some people will criticize, misunderstand, reject, or dislike them. The more visible ambitious or authentic someone becomes, the more criticism naturally appears. Fearless people understand this and move forward anyway. This is why emotionally strong individuals often appear different from the crowd. They are willing to disappoint people temporarily in order to remain true to themselves. They prioritize authenticity over approval. They understand that peace comes from alignment, not popularity. Detaching from opinions does not mean becoming arrogant or ignoring feedback completely. It means refusing to let external judgment define your identity. It means developing enough self-awareness to know who you are even when others misunderstand you. The truth is that many people never become who they truly could be because they spend their entire lives trying to avoid judgment. Fear of rejection keeps them small. Fear of embarrassment keeps them silent. Fear of criticism keeps them invisible. But growth requires visibility. Confidence requires discomfort. Freedom requires detachment from constant approval. The moment someone stops needing validation from everyone around them, emotional freedom begins. Because real power is not controlling other people's opinions. Real power is no longer being controlled by them. Chapter 6. Discipline creates emotional strength. Most people believe emotional strength comes from motivation, inspiration, or positive thinking. They wait to feel ready before taking action. They depend on emotional energy to stay productive, focused, and consistent. But emotions constantly change. Some days motivation appears naturally, and other days it disappears completely. People who rely only on motivation eventually become controlled by their feelings because their actions rise and fall with their emotional state. Discipline is different. Discipline means acting correctly even when emotions disagree. It means continuing forward despite fear, discomfort, stress, boredom, or lack of motivation. While emotionally reactive people wait for the perfect feeling before acting, disciplined people act regardless of how they feel. And over time, this creates enormous emotional strength. The reason discipline is so powerful is because it reduces emotional chaos. Emotionally unstable people often live without structure. Their habits change constantly based on mood. Their productivity depends on emotional energy. Their decisions depend on temporary feelings. As a result, their lives become unpredictable internally and externally. Routines calm the mind because structure reduces uncertainty. When people follow consistent habits, the brain stops wasting energy making emotional decisions repeatedly. Daily structure creates psychological stability because the mind knows what to expect. Chaos decreases when routines become automatic. This is why disciplined people often appear calmer. Their lives are not controlled entirely by emotional impulses. They wake up with purpose. They follow routines consistently. They create systems that support emotional stability instead of depending on temporary motivation. Without discipline, emotions dominate behavior easily. Stress creates procrastination. Anxiety creates avoidance. Fear creates hesitation. Boredom destroys focus. But discipline creates action even when emotions resist. Every time someone follows through despite emotional discomfort, they strengthen self-control. This is how emotional control develops. Not through theory alone, but through repeated behavioral consistency. Most people underestimate how deeply structure affects emotional health. Sleeping at random hours, consuming endless stimulation, avoiding exercise, neglecting routines, and constantly reacting emotionally weakens the nervous system over time. The mind becomes overstimulated, distracted, and emotionally fragile. Discipline restores order internally. Consistent sleep improves emotional regulation. Exercise reduces anxiety and strengthens stress tolerance. Structured routines create mental clarity. Healthy habits stabilize mood and energy levels. Emotional resilience grows because the nervous system becomes more regulated. One of the biggest psychological benefits of discipline is self-respect. Every time people break promises to themselves, confidence weakens slightly. Every delayed goal, abandoned routine, or avoided responsibility quietly damages self-trust. Eventually, people stop believing in themselves because their actions repeatedly contradict their intentions. But consistency rebuilds self-respect slowly over time. When someone wakes up early consistently, exercises regularly, follows routines, controls distractions, and keeps commitments despite emotional resistance, the brain begins developing trust internally. Confidence increases because actions create proof. Self-respect grows because discipline demonstrates reliability to yourself. Emotionally weak people often avoid discomfort constantly. They seek pleasure, distraction, convenience, and emotional relief whenever stress appears. But this pattern creates fragility because the nervous system never learns how to tolerate discomfort properly. Discipline trains emotional resilience by exposing the mind to controlled discomfort repeatedly. Waking up when tired, exercising when unmotivated, focusing when distracted, and staying consistent during difficult periods teaches the nervous system an important lesson. Discomfort is survivable. This changes identity slowly over time. The brain begins realizing that emotions do not always require obedience. Feeling tired does not require quitting. Feeling anxious does not require avoidance. Feeling unmotivated does not require inactivity. Discipline separates feelings from behavior. This separation creates emotional freedom because life stops depending entirely on emotional states. Fear also weakens through repetition. Most fear grows stronger through avoidance. When people avoid uncomfortable situations repeatedly, the brain interprets avoidance as proof that danger exists. Anxiety increases because the nervous system never learns safety, but disciplined repetition retrains the brain. Public speaking becomes less terrifying through repeated exposure. Difficult conversations become easier through practice. Challenges become manageable through consistency. Fear weakens because experience replaces uncertainty. This is why disciplined people often appear fearless. In reality, they simply train themselves to act despite fear repeatedly until the fear lost power. Courage is built through repetition, not emotion. Mental toughness develops the same way. Most people think mentally strong individuals are born different, but mental toughness is largely trained through repeated self-discipline. Every difficult action completed despite emotional resistance strengthens psychological resilience. Small, disciplined behaviors compound into strong character over time. Making the bed when tired seems small. Exercising consistently seems ordinary. Finishing tasks despite distractions seems simple. But these behaviors train the mind to follow standards instead of emotional impulses. Over months and years, this creates enormous psychological strength. Mental toughness is not emotional numbness. It is emotional control. It means discomfort no longer controls decisions automatically. Pressure no longer creates immediate collapse. Fear no longer dominates action completely. Discipline also reduces anxiety because preparation creates confidence. People often feel overwhelmed because their lives lack structure, planning, and consistency. Problems accumulate because responsibilities are avoided emotionally. But disciplined habits create stability and momentum, which reduce emotional stress significantly. Momentum is psychologically powerful. Once disciplined action becomes consistent, emotional resistance weakens because habits become automatic. The hardest part is often beginning. After routines stabilize, the brain adapts to the new identity gradually. This is why disciplined people continue progressing while emotionally reactive people remain stuck. Emotionally reactive people stop whenever feelings become uncomfortable. Disciplined people continue despite discomfort, allowing growth to compound continuously. Modern society often glorifies motivation because motivation feels exciting emotionally, but motivation is temporary. Discipline is reliable. Motivation disappears during difficult periods. Discipline continues anyway, and difficult periods reveal true emotional strength. Anyone can feel motivated when life is easy. Emotional strength appears during stress, uncertainty, boredom, exhaustion, and failure. Discipline allows people to continue functioning effectively even when emotions fluctuate negatively. The truth is that discipline is one of the highest forms of self-love. It means caring enough about your future to act correctly even when your current emotions resist. It means protecting long-term peace instead of chasing temporary comfort. Comfort creates weakness when constantly prioritized. Controlled discomfort creates growth. Over time, disciplined people become calmer, stronger, and more emotionally stable because they stop depending entirely on feelings to guide behavior. They trust routines more than moods. They trust action more than overthinking. They trust consistency more than temporary emotional states. And eventually, discipline becomes more than a habit. It becomes identity. Chapter 7. Your environment programs. Your mind. Most people believe their thoughts are completely independent. They assume their mindset, emotions, habits, and behavior come entirely from personal choice. But the truth is far more uncomfortable. Human beings are deeply shaped by their environment, the people around you, the information you consume, the conversations you hear, the spaces you live in, and the energy surrounding your daily life quietly program your mind every single day. Your environment is either strengthening your mind or weakening it. Most people underestimate the psychological power of emotional contagion. Emotions spread between people constantly, often without conscious awareness. Anxiety spreads, negativity spreads, fear spreads, stress spreads. But calmness, confidence, discipline, and optimism spread too. Human beings naturally absorb the emotional energy of the environments they spend time in. This happens because the brain constantly mirrors social behavior. When surrounded by fearful, negative, emotionally reactive people, the nervous system slowly adapts to that emotional atmosphere. Complaining becomes normal. Anxiety becomes normal. Overthinking becomes normal. Emotional instability becomes contagious. This is why toxic environments are mentally exhausting. Toxic people drain emotional energy because their negativity constantly activates stress inside others. Some people live in permanent emotional chaos. They complain endlessly, create drama constantly, criticize everything, spread fear, and emotionally overwhelm everyone around them. Spending too much time around emotionally unstable people weakens your own mental stability over time. Even if you are naturally calm, repeated exposure to negativity slowly affects your nervous system. Stress increases. Motivation weakens. Emotional exhaustion builds quietly. Many people never realize that their anxiety is not entirely their own. Sometimes it is environmental absorption. Negative environments create fear because the brain adapts to repeated emotional patterns. If someone constantly hears negativity, criticism, hopelessness, and fear-based thinking, the mind slowly begins expecting negative outcomes automatically. The nervous system starts operating in survival mode because the environment signals emotional danger repeatedly. This is why some people feel mentally drained even when nothing major is wrong externally. Their environment constantly overstimulates their nervous system, Loud negativity, toxic conversations, unhealthy relationships, stressful routines, and emotional unpredictability slowly exhaust the mind. Modern life has made this problem even worse through information overload. The human brain was never designed to process endless stimulation 24 hours a day. Constant notifications, social media scrolling, news consumption, advertisements, comparisons, opinions, and digital distractions overwhelm the nervous system continuously. Most people wake up and immediately flood their minds with stress before the day even begins. They check negative headlines, compare themselves online, consume endless opinions, and overload their brains with stimulation. As a result, anxiety becomes chronic because the nervous system never fully rests. Information overload destroys mental clarity. The brain becomes scattered because attention is constantly fragmented. Focus weakens. Emotional regulation declines. Overthinking increases because the mind never gets silence long enough to recover. Fear also spreads rapidly through digital environments. Negative news, outrage-based content, and emotionally charged media activate survival responses constantly. The brain begins perceiving the world as more dangerous than it truly is because fear-based information receives more attention emotionally. Most people do not realize how heavily media consumption affects emotional health. The mind absorbs repeated messages, whether consciously noticed or not. Constant negativity trains the brain to focus on danger, conflict, and uncertainty automatically. Protecting mental energy becomes essential in a world designed to capture attention constantly. Emotionally strong people are extremely careful about what they allow into their minds. They understand that peace is fragile when the environment is chaotic. They protect their focus intentionally because they know attention shapes emotional health. This means limiting unnecessary negativity, reducing exposure to toxic conversations, creating boundaries with emotionally draining people, consuming information carefully instead of endlessly, protecting quiet time, choosing environments that support mental clarity instead of emotional chaos. Boundaries are a form of emotional self-respect. Many people remain emotionally exhausted because they constantly absorb the stress, negativity, and dysfunction of others without limits. They feel guilty protecting their peace, so they continue tolerating environments that damage their mental health. But emotionally healthy people understand something important. Not everyone deserves unlimited access to your energy. Some relationships strengthen you. Others slowly destroy your peace. Growth-focused environments create completely different psychological effects. When surrounded by disciplined, optimistic, emotionally intelligent people, the mind adapts upward. Strong environments normalize growth, responsibility, emotional control, and self-improvement. Suddenly, discipline feels more natural because the environment reinforces it consistently. This is why successful people often emphasize the importance of community and surroundings. Environment shapes standards. If everyone around you avoids responsibility, emotional weakness becomes normal. If everyone around you pursues growth and discipline, your standards naturally rise. The physical environment matters too. Cluttered, chaotic spaces increase mental stress subconsciously. Loud environments overstimulate the nervous system. Constant distraction weakens focus. But calm, organized environments create psychological stability. Small environmental changes create powerful emotional effects. A cleaner room improves clarity. Less screen time improves focus. More nature reduces stress. Better sleep environments strengthen emotional regulation. Quiet spaces improve mental recovery. Designing a calm and fearless lifestyle requires intentionality because modern society constantly pushes people toward distraction, stimulation, and emotional overload. Peace no longer happens automatically. It must be protected deliberately. Fearless living is not just psychological, it is environmental. If someone constantly surrounds themselves with fear, negativity, comparison, stress, and emotional chaos, maintaining peace becomes extremely difficult. But when the environment supports clarity, discipline, calmness, and growth, emotional strength develops much more naturally. This does not mean avoiding all difficulty or negativity completely. That is impossible. Real strength comes from learning how to protect inner stability while still functioning in a chaotic world. The goal is not escaping reality, but creating environments that support emotional resilience instead of emotional exhaustion. Calm people are often extremely intentional about what they consume mentally, emotionally, and socially. They understand that the mind absorbs whatever it experiences repeatedly. Because of this, they choose carefully what enters their lives. They choose conversations carefully. They choose friendships carefully. They choose information carefully. They choose habits carefully. They choose environments carefully. Because eventually, your environment becomes your psychology. And whether people realize it or not, they are slowly becoming like the energy surrounding them every day. Chapter 8. Mastering Pressure and Stress. Pressure reveals who people truly are. Anyone can appear calm when life is comfortable, predictable, and easy. But real emotional strength appears during stressful moments, during uncertainty, conflict, deadlines, presentations, difficult conversations, failures, and high-pressure situations where emotions naturally intensify. These moments expose the difference between emotional control and emotional chaos. Most people collapse mentally under pressure because their nervous systems immediately enter survival mode. The brain interprets pressure as danger, and emotional reactions take over automatically. Heart rate increases, breathing becomes shallow, thoughts become scattered, anxiety rises. Rational thinking weakens while emotional survival responses grow stronger. This is why people often perform below their true potential during important moments. Fear hijacks the mind before performance even begins. Public speaking is one of the clearest examples. Many people fear presentations more than actual physical danger because the brain interprets social judgment as a survival threat. Standing in front of others creates emotional vulnerability. Fear of embarrassment, criticism, rejection, or failure activates the nervous system intensely. The body reacts as if real danger exists, even though no physical threat is present. The same thing happens during interviews, exams, competitions, difficult conversations, negotiations, and major life decisions. Pressure creates emotional intensity because uncertainty and evaluation trigger survival instincts deeply. The problem is not pressure itself. Pressure is normal. The real issue is the inability to regulate the nervous system under pressure. Emotionally strong people understand something important. Calmness is trainable. Staying composed under stress is not simply personality. It is a skill developed through awareness, repetition, and nervous system regulation. Most people try to control stress only mentally, but pressure begins physically. The nervous system reacts before conscious thought fully activates. This means emotional control starts with regulating the body first. Breathing becomes one of the most powerful tools for emotional regulation because breath directly affects the nervous system. Under stress, breathing naturally becomes fast and shallow. This signals danger to the brain and increases anxiety further. But slow, controlled breathing sends the opposite message: safety. This is why breathing techniques work so effectively during stressful moments. Slow breathing lowers heart rate, reduces stress hormones, and restores mental clarity. One simple technique is controlled deep breathing, inhaling slowly through the nose, holding briefly, then exhaling slowly and fully. Long exhalations are especially powerful because they activate the body's calming response. Breathing seems simple, but under pressure it becomes transformational. Calm breathing creates calm thinking. Grounding methods are equally important because pressure often pulls the mind into imagined future disasters. During stress, people begin mentally catastrophizing. They imagine failure, embarrassment, rejection, or worst-case scenarios repeatedly. The brain leaves the present moment and becomes trapped inside fear. Grounding techniques return attention to reality instead of imagination. Focusing on physical sensations, posture, breathing, sounds, or immediate surroundings helps interrupt anxiety loops. The nervous system calms when awareness returns to the present moment rather than fearful future projections. Physical posture also affects emotional state more than most people realize. Under stress, the body often collapses inward. Shoulders tighten, breathing shortens, muscles tense. This posture reinforces fear neurologically, but standing upright, relaxing the shoulders, slowing movements, and maintaining steady posture sends signals of safety and control back to the brain. Emotionally strong individuals often appear calm externally because they consciously control physical reactions internally first. Strategic thinking under stress becomes possible only after emotional regulation begins. When emotions dominate completely, rational thinking weakens dramatically. Fear narrows focus toward danger and survival instead of solutions. This is why emotionally reactive people make poor decisions under pressure. They react emotionally instead of thinking strategically. Calm people do the opposite. They slow down mentally before acting. They assess situations clearly. They focus on solutions instead of panic. They separate emotions from decisions. This ability creates enormous advantages in life because pressure exists everywhere. Careers involve pressure. Leadership involves pressure. Relationships involve pressure. Growth itself involves pressure. People who cannot manage stress become controlled by it. People who master stress become stronger because of it. One of the most important mindset shifts is understanding that pressure is not always negative. Pressure often signals growth, opportunity, importance, or progress. The body's stress response can actually improve performance when managed correctly. Adrenaline increases focus, alertness, and energy. The problem begins only when fear turns pressure into panic. High performers learn how to reinterpret stress differently. Instead of seeing pressure as proof they are weak or incapable, they see pressure as preparation for performance. This psychological shift changes emotional responses dramatically. Fear during important moments is natural. Courageous people still feel nervous before challenges. The difference is that they no longer interpret nervousness as weakness. They understand that emotional activation simply means something matters. This creates emotional resilience because pressure stops feeling like an enemy. Exposure also plays a major role in building composure. Most fear weakens through repeated experience. The first presentation feels terrifying. The 10th presentation feels manageable. The 100th presentation feels natural. Repetition teaches the nervous system that pressure is survivable. Avoidance keeps fear alive. Exposure weakens it. This is why emotionally strong people intentionally place themselves in difficult situations repeatedly. They train composure under stress instead of hiding from discomfort. Over time, their nervous systems adapt. What once felt overwhelming becomes normal. Mental toughness develops gradually through repeated, controlled stress exposure. Small challenges strengthen resilience for larger challenges later. Every difficult situation handled calmly becomes evidence that future pressure can also be managed. Self-talk matters deeply during stressful moments, too. Most people become mentally destructive under pressure. They think, "I'm going to fail," "I can't handle this," or "everyone is judging me." These thoughts intensify anxiety because the brain responds emotionally to internal language. Calm people speak to themselves differently. They focus on action instead of panic. They remind themselves to breathe, stay present, and focus on the next step instead of the entire outcome. Their internal dialogue creates stability instead of emotional collapse. Pressure also becomes easier to manage when identity changes. Weak-minded people view stressful moments as threats to their self-worth. Failure feels personal. Mistakes feel humiliating. Criticism feels devastating. But emotionally strong people separate performance from identity. A difficult moment does not define who they are permanently. This creates emotional flexibility under stress. Mistakes become information instead of emotional disasters. Challenges become opportunities instead of threats. The goal is not eliminating stress completely. Stress is part of life. The goal is becoming stronger than the pressure itself. Composure is one of the highest forms of emotional power because calmness under pressure is rare. Most people become reactive, fearful, impulsive, or overwhelmed during difficult moments. But people who remain calm gain clarity while others lose control. And clarity under pressure changes everything, because the person who controls their mind under stress controls their performance, their decisions, and ultimately their future. Chapter 9. The Mindset of Mentally Strong People. Mentally strong people are not born fearless, emotionless, or naturally superior. They simply think differently. While most people are controlled by emotions, mentally strong individuals train themselves to think beyond temporary feelings. This difference changes how they respond to pressure, setbacks, uncertainty, failure, and life itself. Most people live emotionally. They make decisions based on comfort, fear, mood, insecurity, and temporary emotional states. If they feel motivated, they act. If they feel anxious, they avoid. If they feel discouraged, they quit. Their emotions constantly control their direction. Mentally strong people operate differently. They prioritize long-term thinking over short-term emotional relief. They understand that emotions change constantly, but consequences last much longer. Because of this, they make decisions based on values, goals, and discipline rather than temporary feelings. This mindset creates enormous advantages over time. Emotionally driven people seek immediate comfort. Mentally strong people tolerate temporary discomfort for long-term growth. One avoids difficult conversations to escape anxiety. The other faces discomfort because they value honesty and growth more than emotional ease. One quits when things become difficult. The other continues because they understand that progress often feels uncomfortable. Long-term thinking is one of the clearest differences between average and mentally strong individuals. Most people focus only on immediate emotional states. They want instant results, instant happiness, instant confidence, and instant success. But emotionally mature people understand that meaningful growth takes time. They think in years instead of days. This changes how they handle failure and setbacks. Emotionally reactive people interpret setbacks as proof they are weak, unlucky, or incapable. Small failures emotionally destroy them because they focus only on the immediate pain. But mentally strong people see setbacks differently. They view failure as feedback, training, and part of the growth process. This psychological difference is powerful. Elite performers understand that failure is unavoidable in any meaningful pursuit. Athletes lose competitions. Entrepreneurs experience losses. Leaders face criticism. Creators produce imperfect work. Growth always includes discomfort, mistakes, and uncertainty. Mentally strong people accept this reality instead of emotionally collapsing every time difficulty appears. This creates resilience. Resilience is not the absence of pain. It is the ability to recover, adapt, and continue moving forward despite pain. Mentally strong people still experience fear, disappointment, frustration, and stress, but they do not allow those emotions to permanently control their behavior. Adaptability is another core characteristic of mentally strong individuals. Weak-minded people break when life becomes unpredictable because they depend heavily on certainty and control. Unexpected challenges overwhelm them emotionally because their mindset is rigid. But mentally strong people adapt quickly because they understand life constantly changes. They focus on controlling responses instead of controlling everything externally. This flexibility creates emotional stability during chaos. While emotionally reactive people panic under pressure, mentally strong individuals slow down mentally. They focus on solutions instead of emotional drama. They remain grounded while others become overwhelmed. Calmness during chaos is not accidental. It is trained. Most people lose control during stressful moments because emotions dominate thinking immediately. Fear narrows perception. Anxiety weakens judgment. Anger destroys clarity. But mentally strong people practice emotional regulation consistently, which allows them to think strategically even during difficult situations. They understand that panic never improves performance. This is why elite performers often appear calm under extreme pressure. They train themselves to separate emotions from execution. They feel stress, but they do not surrender to it completely. Their minds remain functional during chaos because emotional control became habitual. One of the most important traits of mentally strong people is their ability to turn setbacks into fuel. Instead of allowing pain to destroy them, they use adversity as motivation for growth. Criticism becomes feedback. Failure becomes education. Rejection becomes redirection. Most people waste emotional pain by turning it into self-pity, anger, or hopelessness. Mentally strong people transform pain into energy for improvement. This does not mean pretending pain does not exist. Emotionally mature people acknowledge difficulty honestly. They simply refuse to become victims of it. They ask different questions during hard times. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" they ask, "What can this teach me?" Or, "How can this make me stronger?" That shift changes everything psychologically. Mental toughness is deeply connected to self-trust. Weak-minded people constantly doubt themselves because they rely heavily on external validation, emotional comfort, and perfect conditions before acting. Mentally strong people trust their ability to adapt, recover, and handle challenges even when outcomes remain uncertain. This trust develops through action and consistency. Every difficult situation survived builds evidence internally. Every challenge faced courageously strengthens identity. Every promise kept to oneself increases self-respect. Over time, mentally strong people develop confidence not because life becomes easier, but because they repeatedly prove they can handle difficult situations. Self-respect becomes one of their strongest emotional foundations. Most people damage self-respect quietly through avoidance, inconsistency, dishonesty, and emotional impulsiveness. They abandon goals, break promises to themselves, avoid responsibility, and let fear control decisions. Over time, they stop trusting themselves because their actions repeatedly contradict their intentions. Mentally strong people protect self-respect through discipline and integrity. They do what they say they will do even when motivation disappears. They face uncomfortable situations instead of avoiding them constantly. They hold themselves accountable privately, not just publicly. This creates inner strength because self-respect produces psychological stability. The psychology of mental toughness is not about aggression, emotional suppression, or pretending to be invincible. Real mental toughness is emotional control combined with resilience. It is the ability to remain functional, disciplined, and focused even during emotional discomfort. Mentally tough people understand that life will never become permanently comfortable. There will always be uncertainty, criticism, pressure, setbacks, and fear. Instead of waiting for perfect conditions emotionally, they train themselves to function effectively despite imperfect conditions. This mindset creates freedom because emotions stop controlling every decision. Weak-minded people constantly ask, "How do I avoid discomfort?" Mentally strong people ask, "How do I grow through discomfort?" That difference shapes identity over time. The truth is that mental toughness is built slowly through repeated small decisions. Waking up despite tiredness, staying calm during conflict, continuing despite fear, maintaining discipline during difficult periods, recovering after failure, choosing growth over comfort repeatedly. These small decisions compound into powerful character over time. Mentally strong people are not special because they never struggle emotionally. They are strong because they refuse to surrender completely to those struggles. They continue moving forward even when emotions become difficult. And eventually, this creates something most people never fully develop: an unshakable mind. Chapter 10. Rewiring your identity for fearless living. Most people try to change their lives without changing their identity. They focus on temporary motivation, short-term goals, or surface-level habits while continuing to see themselves the same way internally. They say they want confidence, discipline, courage, or emotional control. But deep down they still believe they are anxious, weak, unworthy, or incapable. And because identity shapes behavior, they eventually return to old patterns again. Real transformation begins when identity changes. Human behavior always follows internal self-image. People act according to who they believe they are. Someone who sees themselves as lazy struggles to stay disciplined consistently. Someone who believes they are socially awkward avoids confidence-building situations automatically. Someone who identifies as fearful unconsciously chooses safety over growth repeatedly. This is why temporary motivation rarely creates lasting change. Motivation can inspire action briefly, but identity determines long-term behavior. If the mind still believes old emotional patterns define who you are, those patterns eventually return. Fearless living is not about becoming a completely different human being overnight. It is about gradually rewiring the internal identity that controls your behavior. It is about teaching the mind a new story about who you are and what you are capable of becoming. Most people carry emotional identities created years earlier. Childhood experiences, criticism, failures, rejection, embarrassment, trauma, and social conditioning shape self-perception deeply. Over time, repeated emotional experiences create unconscious beliefs like, "I'm not confident," "I'm not good enough," "I always fail," or "I can't handle pressure." These beliefs quietly control behavior for years. The brain constantly searches for evidence that confirms identity. If someone believes they are weak, they notice every mistake and ignore every success. If someone believes they are incapable, they avoid challenges that could disprove that belief. Identity filters reality itself. This is why breaking old emotional patterns requires more than positive thinking. It requires behavioral proof. The brain changes identity through repeated evidence, not empty words alone. Every courageous action weakens fearful identity slightly. Every disciplined decision strengthens a stronger self-image. Every difficult situation survived creates evidence that you are more capable than fear once suggested. This process compounds over time. Most people underestimate the compound effect of courage. One courageous conversation may seem small. One disciplined morning may seem insignificant. One uncomfortable action may appear meaningless. But repeated over months and years, these small moments completely reshape identity. Fearless people are not fearless because they never feel fear. They became fearless because they repeatedly acted despite fear until courage became part of their identity. Their nervous systems adapted through repetition. Their minds gathered evidence that discomfort was survivable. Their self-image changed slowly through action. The brain rewires itself through repeated experience. Neural pathways strengthen based on repeated thoughts, behaviors, and emotional responses. This means fearful thinking can become weaker, while courageous thinking becomes stronger. Emotional patterns are trainable, but this requires consistency. Most people quit rewiring themselves too early because they expect immediate transformation. They become discouraged when fear still appears after a few attempts. But identity changes gradually. Old emotional patterns built themselves over years. Rewiring them requires repetition, patience, and persistence. Anti-fragile thinking becomes important during this process. Fragile people break under pressure. Resilient people survive pressure. But anti-fragile people become stronger because of pressure. They use challenges as fuel for growth instead of evidence of weakness. This mindset changes how difficulties are interpreted psychologically. Fearful people see obstacles as proof they should stop. Anti-fragile people see obstacles as training. Fearful people avoid pressure because they fear emotional discomfort. Mentally strong people understand discomfort is often the pathway to growth. Every difficult situation becomes an opportunity to strengthen identity. This creates fearless decision-making over time. Fearful people make decisions primarily to avoid pain, embarrassment, rejection, or uncertainty. Their lives become controlled by emotional protection. But fearless individuals make decisions based on values, purpose, and growth instead of emotional avoidance. This does not mean recklessness. Fearless decision-making still considers consequences carefully, but emotionally strong people refuse to let fear make all their choices for them. They stop asking, "What feels safest?" and begin asking, "What aligns with the person I want to become?" That shift changes life entirely. Creating a new mental operating system requires replacing unconscious emotional habits with intentional psychological patterns. Most people operate mentally on autopilot. Their reactions, fears, routines, and thought patterns happen automatically because they were repeated for years. But awareness interrupts autopilot. Once someone becomes conscious of their emotional patterns, they can begin changing them deliberately. They can replace impulsive reactions with calm responses, replace avoidance with action, replace overthinking with execution, replace fear-based decisions with purpose-driven choices. The mind slowly adapts to whatever patterns are repeated consistently. This is why environment, habits, routines, and daily behavior matter so deeply. Every repeated action reinforces identity. Every disciplined choice tells the brain, "I am becoming stronger." Every courageous moment says, "Fear does not control me anymore." Eventually, these actions stop feeling unnatural. The new identity becomes familiar. Living with purpose instead of fear creates emotional freedom because purpose gives pain meaning. Fear-focused people constantly ask how to avoid discomfort. Purpose-focused people accept discomfort because they are moving towards something larger than temporary emotional comfort. Purpose creates direction during uncertainty. It stabilizes the mind during chaos because decisions become guided by values instead of emotions alone. Fear loses power when life becomes connected to something meaningful. Most people never fully realize how much fear shapes their existence. Fear controls careers, relationships, opportunities, conversations, and decisions quietly in the background. Fear keeps people small because safety feels emotionally comfortable. But comfort slowly becomes a prison when growth disappears. Fearless living begins the moment someone decides they no longer want fear controlling their identity. Not because fear disappears completely, but because growth becomes more important than emotional safety. This transformation does not happen in one dramatic moment. It happens through repeated daily choices, small acts of courage, small moments of discipline, small decisions to continue despite discomfort, and eventually, those small choices create a completely different person, a person who still feels fear sometimes, but no longer belongs to it. Chapter 11. Becoming emotionally free. Most people believe freedom means money, success, status, or external independence. But real freedom is much deeper than that. Real freedom is emotional. It is the ability to remain calm when life becomes chaotic. It is the ability to think clearly when emotions become intense. It is the ability to maintain peace without depending completely on other people, circumstances, or temporary feelings. Most people are not emotionally free. They are emotionally controlled. Their mood changes depending on how others treat them. Their confidence rises and falls based on validation. Their peace disappears when life becomes uncertain. One criticism ruins their day. One rejection destroys their confidence. One stressful moment creates emotional chaos internally. This is emotional dependency. Emotionally dependent people rely heavily on external conditions to feel stable internally. They need approval to feel worthy. They need certainty to feel calm. They need control to feel safe. They need constant reassurance to feel confident. As a result, their emotional state becomes fragile because life itself is unpredictable. The problem with emotional dependency is that it gives enormous power to external circumstances. If your happiness depends entirely on how others behave, you will constantly feel unstable because people are unpredictable. If your confidence depends entirely on success, failure will emotionally destroy you. If your peace depends entirely on perfect conditions, life will always disturb you eventually. Emotionally free people are different. They still experience emotions deeply, but they are no longer completely controlled by them. Their emotional stability comes more from internal self-control than external perfection. This creates enormous peace. Freedom from emotional chaos begins when people stop allowing every feeling to control their behavior automatically. Most emotional suffering is intensified because people react impulsively instead of responding consciously. Anger creates aggressive behavior. Anxiety creates avoidance. Fear creates paralysis. Sadness creates hopelessness. But emotionally mature individuals learn how to pause before reacting. They understand that emotions are temporary experiences, not permanent commands. This awareness changes everything. Responding instead of reacting becomes one of the most important emotional skills in life. Reacting is automatic, emotional, and impulsive. Responding is calm, conscious, and intentional. Reactive people allow emotions to control decisions immediately. Responsive people observe emotions first before deciding how to act. This creates emotional stability because temporary feelings stop controlling permanent behavior. Most conflict, regret, and emotional pain come from impulsive reactions, words spoken in anger, decisions made in fear, actions driven by insecurity. Emotionally free people understand that emotional control protects peace far more effectively than emotional impulsiveness ever could. Creating inner peace requires emotional responsibility. Many people blame others for their emotional suffering constantly. They say things like, "They made me angry," or "They ruined my peace." But while people can trigger emotions, they do not fully control your response. Emotional freedom begins when people stop giving complete responsibility for their internal state to external situations. This does not mean ignoring pain or pretending emotions do not matter. Real emotional freedom is not suppression, it is mastery. Emotionally mature people acknowledge emotions honestly without becoming consumed by them. They allow themselves to feel anger without becoming destructive. They experience fear without surrendering completely. They feel sadness without losing themselves entirely. This balance creates powerful self-control. Self-control is one of the highest forms of strength because it requires awareness, discipline, and emotional intelligence simultaneously. Most people can control themselves when life feels easy. Real emotional mastery appears during stress, conflict, uncertainty, and emotional pressure. The ability to remain calm while others lose control is rare, and that calmness creates confidence. Calm confidence is different from loud confidence. Loud confidence often seeks attention, validation, or dominance externally. Calm confidence feels stable internally. It does not need constant approval because it comes from self-trust instead of public opinion. Emotionally free people trust themselves deeply because they repeatedly prove they can handle difficult emotions without collapsing completely. Every challenge survived builds inner stability. Every emotional reaction controlled strengthens self-respect. Over time, they stop fearing emotions themselves. Most people are not actually afraid of situations alone. They are afraid of the emotions those situations might create. Fear of embarrassment, fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of emotional pain. But emotionally free individuals realize something powerful. Emotions are survivable. This realization changes decision-making completely. When someone no longer fears emotional discomfort intensely, they become more courageous naturally. They take risks more confidently. They speak honestly more freely. They pursue goals more boldly. Fear loses much of its control because emotional resilience increases. This also makes emotionally free people difficult to manipulate. Manipulation works through emotional triggers. Guilt, fear, insecurity, approval-seeking, and emotional dependency make people easier to control. Manipulative individuals often exploit emotional weaknesses intentionally or unconsciously. They use criticism, validation, anger, silence, or emotional pressure to influence behavior. But emotionally grounded people become harder to manipulate because they are less reactive emotionally. They do not panic when criticized. They do not collapse when rejected. They do not betray their values simply to gain approval. Their decisions come from self-awareness rather than emotional pressure. This creates enormous personal power. Becoming emotionally untouchable does not mean becoming cold, arrogant, or disconnected from others. It means your peace becomes stronger than external chaos. It means you stop absorbing every negative emotion around you. It means emotional triggers lose their automatic control over your behavior. Inner peace becomes your foundation instead of external validation. One of the most beautiful parts of emotional freedom is simplicity. Emotionally reactive people live mentally exhausted lives because their minds constantly swing between fear, anxiety, anger, comparison, insecurity, and emotional overthinking. But emotionally free people simplify their inner world. They stop chasing constant approval. They stop needing to win every argument. They stop overreacting to every problem. They stop personalizing everything. They stop allowing temporary emotions to dominate their lives. This creates quiet strength. The truth is that emotional mastery changes every area of life. Relationships improve because communication becomes calmer and more mature. Decision-making improves because fear stops controlling choices. Mental health improves because emotional chaos decreases. Confidence improves because self-respect grows stronger. And perhaps most importantly, life begins feeling lighter. Not because problems disappear completely, but because you stop fighting your emotions blindly and start understanding them consciously. Real freedom is not controlling the world around you. Real freedom is finally controlling yourself. Conclusion: fear never disappears, but you become stronger. Fear and emotions are part of being human. No matter how mentally strong, disciplined, or successful someone becomes, fear never completely disappears. There will always be uncertainty, pressure, risk, rejection, discomfort, and moments where the mind wants safety instead of growth. The goal of this book was never to teach you how to eliminate fear forever. That is impossible. The real goal is far more powerful: learning how to stop fear from controlling your life. Courage is not the absence of emotional discomfort. Courage is action despite discomfort. It is speaking even when your voice shakes. It is moving forward even when uncertainty exists. It is remaining calm while emotions try to pull you into chaos. Mentally strong people are not fearless because they feel nothing. They are fearless because they have trained themselves to respond differently to what they feel. This is where emotional mastery creates freedom. When you control your emotions stop controlling your decisions. Fear no longer decides your future. Anger no longer destroys your relationships. Anxiety no longer paralyzes your potential. Overthinking no longer steals your energy. You begin living intentionally instead of emotionally reacting to everything around you. Your future depends less on your circumstances and more on your responses. Life will challenge everyone eventually. Stress, criticism, pressure, failure, uncertainty, and setbacks are unavoidable parts of existence. But your response to those moments shapes the direction of your life. Weak reactions create weak outcomes. Calm discipline creates powerful transformation. The beautiful truth is that transformation does not require perfection. It requires consistency. Small daily actions slowly reshape identity. Every time you stay calm instead of reacting impulsively, you become stronger. Every time you act despite fear, confidence grows. Every time you choose discipline over emotional comfort, you build self-respect. These moments may seem small individually, but together they create massive long-term change. This is the compound effect of courage, calmness, and discipline. Mentally strong people are not born different from everyone else. They are trained through repetition, discomfort, awareness, and intentional action. Their confidence was built. Their emotional control was practiced. Their resilience was developed one difficult moment at a time. And the same transformation is possible for you. You do not need to become perfect overnight. You simply need to start. Start controlling one reaction. Start taking one courageous action. Start building one disciplined habit. Over time, those small victories become a new identity. Because fear may never fully disappear, but you can become stronger than it.